Thanks, comrades, and a really fantastic conference. Been really pleasurable to be involved today, and we had an excellent session on housing. We've heard a lot today about how we need to have a general strike, and I don't think there's any argument against that, and we would be very supportive of that in our branch. But I think where we haven't been able to get a general strike, what we've been able to do in our branch in our own way is to have our own mini one branch general strike, because we cover lots of different housing association and housing body employers. And just to give a flavour of that, we had a massive campaign around a rep who was sacked, and we've now got 4 new reps in her place. She didn't want to go back into the workplace, understandably. We had a massive campaign sort of kicking off a whole series of actions. And we then went on to have a strike within the social housing regulator, which is where I work, in one housing group, and you heard also from an Equinox speaker this morning. And what I think is really clear about our sector is that it ticks every single box you could possibly imagine for why it is not possible for this workplace or that workplace to go on strike. Lots of low-paid workers who work in very small projects for lots and lots of different employers, all very worried about money, so even the idea of taking 1 day of action is really a big concern for them. They're isolated workers, they've got bullying bosses, they've got the whole thing going against them. And yet it has been possible by working with the reps and giving the reps confidence, and giving the reps confidence to have confidence in their members. It has been possible to actually move a whole series of workplaces to take industrial action. So much so that this week we've heard that one of the workplaces, there's been absolutely major concessions in one housing group that are being suggested, and hopefully will lead to a resolution after 3 days of strike action, that they won't actually go on to take the next 3 days of strike action that they were planning. And in another one of our workplaces, just the mere act of balloting, because they now know we are deadly serious when we say we will take strike action, and we will make a splash, and we will have a very loud, noisy picket line outside every single office where we can mount it. And this means multiple picket lines in our type of work, in our type of sector. We've actually been able to do that. And another one of our employers has now come back to the negotiating table with new offers after just the threat of strike action. But what really came across loud and clear today from the early afternoon workshop that we had was that we need to work right across the whole community. Housing is such a massive issue, and we need to look at things like the evictions, because unlike the poll tax, actually, the bedroom tax, as it's called, is actually quite a complex tax and quite a complex situation. And there are lots of other issues as well. There are lots of other ways that housing is coming under attack. So what we need to do is to link up these campaigns and to work with tenants groups and with other campaign groups. And we need the union branch to actually be, and the whole of the trade union, to be a locus for that kind of campaigning. I'm being shown the pink card, so I'm going to finish there. But all I would say to people is, like within the 1111 branch, where we've been able to do it with a degree of success, just never give up. Just keep going. Thank you.
Comrades, be quick without the mic. Can you do what Suzanne did? When you come in, just say your name and where you're from.
Thanks, Chair. Mark Evans, Branch Sec of Camden County Unison branch, and on Unison Local Government Service Group Executive. I'll try and keep my remarks short. We've been talking about what a future Labour government will do, and I think a lot of us here have got no doubt about that. But we have a Labour government. We have a Labour government in Wales, and if Unison bureaucracy to believe, and by the way, Unite and GMB, unions affiliated to Labour, if they're to be believed, then the Welsh Assembly Labour government has built a fortress around Wales to protect us from the worst effects of the condoms. But the reality is that fortress has been erected to protect the Welsh Labour government from criticism. Because the reality is, pure and simple, it is a lie to say they protected us from cuts. In health, we've seen 660 million, by the way, there's only 3 million people living in Wales, 660 million pounds of the cuts in 3 years in health, which will mean by 2014-15 that Wales will have the lowest spending per head of the population for any country in the UK. We've always argued in the Socialist Party that local government cuts have been backloaded, and a recent document produced by HR directors in Wales has now confirmed what we have always argued. They are talking about £520 million of the cuts in the next 2 or 3 years. That would absolutely decimate the Welsh economy and would be massive misery for working class people. Because in Wales, we have more people working in the public sector than any other part of the UK. Of the working population, 27% work in the public sector. My hometown, my old town, Llanelli, I'll have to give it a mention, 47,000 people live there. There are 3 food banks in Llanelli. 24,000 jobs could go in local government in the next couple of years. So what's happened in England is now come to us. To say the Welsh Assembly, a Welsh Labour government has protected us, is an absolute a lie. The Welsh Local Government Associations talked about 52% of non-statutory services going. It would be a public service desert in Wales if these cuts are allowed to go ahead. I'm very proud of my branch. My branch has a no-cuts stance. It's the only one in Wales, in local government and the public sector, that has that stance. But that will change. It will have to change. And increasingly, our demand for a 24-hour general strike has an increasing echo amongst our members who can see the need for that. But the National Shop Stewards Network, and we all have to make that a reality by campaigning in our branches, by fighting for it and making it reality. Thank you very much.
John Mann, GMB W50, Shropshire Trade Council. Now, what I'm going to tell you, you couldn't make up. I was at a meeting on the executive on a Thursday night. We would do a public meeting, anti-cuts meeting on the Monday, a meeting that wasn't even called, 4 of us turned up, actually decided to cancel it. I was at a Trades Council meeting, and my branch is an old blue-collar branch. I've got Labour Party members, I've got councillors, I've got a cabinet member on, a bit of a careerist. They voted unanimously for our policy at the branch, for coordinated action against the cuts. We took this to the Trades Council, dominated by SWP and fellow travellers. Not one person outside our branch was actually prepared to support it. Well, so I don't think we're just fighting the Tories and the TUC, we're fighting half the left as well. Comrades, I move.
Dave Gilchrist, National Union Teachers and member of Socialist Workers' Party. First thing I'd like to say is how privileged I was today to hear Tommy Sheridan speak. I think the great thing about Tommy is he absolutely expresses the class anger that people feel about the attacks of austerity and especially about the bedroom tax. Now, I'm a teacher, and teachers are very angry because we not only had the attacks on our pension last year when we did take national action over it, alongside the PCS, who also took action on that day. We had a magnificent day. Since then, that's been rolled back in terms of the action. But actually, the attacks have not been rolled back because, as you're all aware, the attacks on our pay now and latterly the attacks on our conditions. On my wage slip, comrades, it says that I work 32 hours a week. Any teacher, of course, will tell you that's an absolute joke. Most teachers are in that building maybe 50 hours a week. What Gove wants to do is remove any statutory protection that we have in terms of that. They want to tear up our contracts. They want to make teachers work as long as the management wants them to work. And they want to reduce our pay by bringing in, performance-related pay. So teachers are angry and teachers are prepared to take action. Now, we took action last week in the North West, and as Martin said this morning, that programme will be rolled out and there will be national action. So when we talk about the general strike, comrades, the general strike is not and it's very important, is passing resolutions in your union branch, but it's about the practical solidarity. So, for instance, although it was only action in the North West this week, actually NUT branches all around the country sent solidarity messages, sent pictures of solidarity, sent solidarity teddy bears to the North West to provide that. And that's what we need to do, comrades. We need to build up the networks of practical solidarity in every workplace. If you can't be taking action, you need to be building action in places that are doing it. Now, as I said, people are angry, and I think that was shown last week in the People's Assembly. 4,000 people there gathered, trade unionists, activists from Occupy, UK Uncut, all the various activist groups from around the country. Now, we can criticise what came out of the People's Assembly. We can criticise Len McCluskey, certainly, for some of the things he said. But actually, what came out of the People's Assembly was an overwhelming desire for unity, for people to come together, for people to fight austerity, and that is what we need to do now, comrades.
April Ashley, a delegate from Southwark Trades Council, but I'm also speaking in a personal capacity because I'm a Unison rep on the NEC, and I think anybody who comes up here and speaks from Unison are also speaking in a personal capacity, even if they don't say it. And I work in local government, and I think we've spoken this morning about what's happening, the unprecedented attacks in local government on our jobs and services, and Gov's latest cuts in local services. And just in my section, we've had 5 reorganisations in 3 years, and you know, people are suffering, and the stress is quite unimaginable, and people's health is breaking down. But people are furious. They are angry about the attacks, as the axe can go on them any time. And members are looking for the Unison leadership to defend them against the attacks. And I want to talk about why Unison isn't really defending members nationally, even though Unison are one of the unions that voted for the general strike motion. But unfortunately, the leadership's position is to wait for the Labour government to rescue us. So the Unison leadership isn't fighting back around pay. You know, we know what's happening there. So for another year, we've had no national campaign to protect us from the Tory onslaught. Now, many local branches are fighting back with what, you know, we've heard about that. And Unison leadership believes and hopes that Labour will rescue us. But our members are saying, well, you know, what is Labour doing about it? They don't believe what Unison said, that Labour will rescue us. And I just had a chat with one of our members yesterday, and he goes, well, what is Labour doing? Why isn't Labour fighting? And he said to me, look, we've really got to seriously think about our relationship to Labour. You know, we can't carry on like this. And members can see that Labour is no longer representing us. In our Unison conference just last week, a member from the conference floor ripped up his Labour Party card, said, you know, I can't longer support Labour because what they're doing over benefits, about what they're doing over the welfare attacks. So more and more members are saying Labour is not representing us. And after the next general election, if Labour, you know, gets into power, even though they're clearly trying not to get into power, then more and more of our members are going to be saying, you know, increasingly questioning what is our relationship to Labour, that we can't no longer support Labour, and we need to start to think about building our own workers' party. Thank you.
My name is Helen Patterson. I'm from the Youth Fight for Jobs campaign, and I'm a member of Unite Food, Drink and Tobacco because I work in a pub, but I want to speak about our new initiative called Sick of Your Boss, which is aimed at underemployed people and young people who are thinking of organising in their workplaces and who are looking towards the trade union movement. The campaign is to highlight how young workers' lives have really been put on hold by the terrible conditions they face at work, with 0-hour contracts and low wages and temporary jobs. Over 3.3 million people working here today are wanting more hours from their work. And lots of young underemployed people are looking towards the unions as ways to organise and thinking about organising their workplaces because they're so angered by the terrible conditions they face and the prospect of a life in poverty in and out of work. I work in a pub myself where there was a lot of illegal shift patterns, as in we're having to work until 2 a.m. and finish at, and then start again at 9. But we organised with the Sick of Your Boss campaign and the Unite members there. We organised the staff, and really organising the next generation of trade unionists against what was happening. We organised a meeting with the management, told them that we wouldn't be bullied anymore, demanded that we got 11 hours between our shifts, demanded that we were put on 40-hour contracts rather than 0-hour contracts, and we won that. And although we didn't win all the people from the workplace to the trade union, we've definitely strengthened Unite there. And so I'm urging everyone here today to think about how they can do a similar thing, how they can try and encourage young workers to organise in places like mine, in pubs and restaurants, in call centres. There's a piece of paper on all of your chairs of how your branch can affiliate. But the bottom bit of that is not just affiliating, it's where can you go to try and spread the message to young workers that they don't have to put up with the rubbish conditions that they're facing, that they could organise in a trade union and start really fighting back. So if people can think about what they can do to be involved in Sick of Your Boss, we've got a week of action coming up between the 8th and 14th. We're going to target Primark, who are one of the worst employers of people here, but also around the world, to try and unionise those members, to try and organise them, to try and organise young people to say that we've had enough of these cuts, but we've had enough of these terrible conditions in our workplaces, and we want to get organised as the next generation of trade unionists and fight back so that we're not a lost generation. Thank you.
Hi, Chairman. Tony Mulherin, Liverpool. I made the point some time ago that the NSSN can play a vital role, not only in the industrial field, but also in the political field. And in fact, I think at some stage we should recognise or regard Tusk as the political wing of the National Shop Stewards Network, because we have to conduct a parallel campaign. Because sometimes I feel I'm living in a parallel universe. I observe councillors putting their hands up in industrial meetings against the cuts and then going into the council chamber and voting for the same cuts. We've got a peculiar situation in Liverpool, for instance, where Mayor Anderson, an old colleague of ours, militant supporter in the roaring 70s and 80s, who's now done a double flip, and is the greatest advocate of cuts and neoliberalism that the world has ever seen. This is a guy who is top of the league for the cuts. I've recited this story. I'm a Liverpudlian. And I remember picking up the Liverpool Echo a couple of months back, and it said, Liverpool are top of the league. And I thought, I must have missed something here. They must have won the last 12 matches, and I wasn't aware of this. It was actually referring to the Liverpool City Council as the top council who've carried out most efficiently the most cuts compared to any other local authority in the UK, with Mayor Anderson as the proud champion of the cuts. He's proud of it. So proud that he's Michael Heseltine's pet. He gave Michael Heseltine, the bloke who slashed 120 million from Liverpool's budget between 79 and 83, he gave them the freedom of the city. Unison at his conference last week, who did he invite to open the conference? Mayor Anderson. I picked up the Liverpool Echo a couple of nights later, and they got the TUC battle bus. You had Prentice on one side, the president of Unison on the other side, opposing cuts, and who's in the middle, with a vacant expression on his face? Mayor Anderson, with a no cuts placard. The following day, he goes and votes for the second tranche of the highest cuts seen in the history of Liverpool. So what we've got is this gigantic omerta within the ranks of the TUC, within the ranks of the bureaucracy, where there is no call for councillors to oppose cuts. There was a meeting last weekend of 4,000 people, the Assembly in London. My information is not a single keynote speaker raised the demand for Labour councillors to vote against the cuts. So there's a gigantic dichotomy. There's a parallel universe which Labour councillors exist in and the rest of the movement exist in. We had a meeting in Liverpool and a councillor, I think it was in the SWP, came down from Manchester to speak. And he said, we shouldn't condemn all councillors. There's a councillor in Manchester, he's a member of the PCS, he's a good industrial activist, but he goes in the council chamber and he votes for cuts. Well, I said to him, and I said at this meeting, a councillor who does that is parallel with somebody who crosses the picket line during the course of an industrial dispute. They should. There's a Unite councillor over the water in Wirral. He squirms with embarrassment when he meets me. I said, Joe, when are you going to vote against the cuts? You're a Unite member. You have a responsibility to carry out Unite policy. He said, Tony, you've got to look at the big picture. I said, are you talking about the Titanic? Because that's where you're going to end up, Joe. And I think in the NSSN now has to conduct a campaign in the broad lefts of every trade union to put pressure on these councillors. There are 6 Labour councillors out of 6,500 who voted against the cuts. That is an absolute obscenity. I went up to Lenny McCluskey, for instance, when I stood as mayor, and we had an excellent debate earlier on in the workshop when I was standing for mayor. Lenny is obviously torn, an old mate of mine. I said, Len, I'm standing for the mayor, which way are you going to vote? He said, I'm going to vote for you, of course, but don't tell anyone. So you've got this split personality, and it's our job, because there's no doubt there's a growing feeling of anger amongst the rank and file of the trade union movement who are constantly running into the bureaucracy. If we can develop and give confidence to that rank and file movement, and we can through the NSSN, we can put pressure on Labour and we put pressure on these councillors. In the process, we can counterpose Tusk as the alternative to Labour councillors who are prepared to vote against cuts. In Liverpool, I'll finish on this note. At our meeting, David Nellis reported that Tusk, next time around, are going to field the highest number of candidates in history of Tusk. In Liverpool, we've just produced 10,000 quality leaflets aimed at the activists, persuading people to stand for Tusk. Tusk is the future, and I think this NSSN can play a vital role in ensuring that we raise the whole profile of Tusk and attack Labour councillors who are stabbing the working class in the back.
Another great day at the NSSN, may it long continue. And I hope we're here and the next time we all reconvene and we've got the victories that we scream for today in the name of social justice for the working class and the unemployed and the most disabled and vulnerable people in our society. Just on that, the political masters with their austerity measures are assaulting every level of class in our society, from people in work to the unemployed, the disabled and the most vulnerable people in our society. And I think we have a duty, we have an absolute moral obligation to stand and fight for the people who can't fight and to unify every single trade union across the UK and into France if need be to fight back at the austerity measures being imposed by this bankrupt government, in my humble opinion. And then you stand back and you look what we're going to get in the future. We're going to get a Labour government, the TUC, or the Camerons of the world. And I look at, I stand back and I ask myself, what's the difference? There ain't no difference between any of them. And the only people who can make that difference is people like ourselves in this room to join the campaigns and get involved in the process. You've got the workers and the bosses trying to impose draconian measures on pay, work and hours and the conditions. And then the government then further to try and justify and help the bosses are trying to create an illusion that anyone on benefits is a scrounger and anyone that's disabled isn't that disabled. And they're using the working class to agitate people to get involved in this I would say, cull of benefits in the name of savings and it's morally, again, and it's against the principles of any trade union, regardless of who the masters are. With the disabled people, they're pitching disabled people against each other. Sadly, I'm proud of my son. He's got a disability, he's Down syndrome. I attended a school this week to get him in there. They're telling me now there's 4 people with disabilities and we have to rank your son to get in. What an absolute disgrace in today's society that my son has to be pitched against 3 other people with that level of disability. We have to get 4 of them people into these types of educational systems that will help and support them in their futures. There may be one victor, there may be one victorious guy or girl or child that gets the place, but my concern is the 75% or the 3 people out of the 4 that don't get in. What happens to these poor people when the system collapses? You've got then the pensioners' dispute and the pensions. You've got the fuel allowances. You've got the medical and the National Health Service are all under strain too. If you go and visit your doctor in the future, if it's not defined as an emergency, you'll be hit with £40 because it's not an emergency. So if you've got the poorest people and the sickest people, the most vulnerable people in our society who goes to the doctor, PFI, suddenly is faced with a bill that will stop people going to the doctors and their GPs. The bedroom tax, absolutely inspired by Tommy Sheridan. Thanks for coming along, Tommy. We need lights like you sometimes in darkness. Absolutely inspired by the campaigns and led in Scotland, and we do need to organise that right across the political landscape in the UK. And if we could galvanise and harness some of that passion through our protests locally, we do need to do that. So I'll end on that. I'm conscious of time, but I would like to say, when we chat about collective organising and collective actions, I've got half a dozen shop stewards today from Honda. And I would like to publicly thank them for the fantastic campaign with full support of the NSSN when the political masters and the leaders of some trade unions and the TUC turned their backs on us as trade union members in that factory. My shop stewards stood behind me with the NSN and back to work and back fighting, and this man ain't going nowhere. Thank you very much.
Adrian O'Malley, Branch Secretary, Mid Yorkshire Health Unison Branch. Speaking in a personal capacity, I'll get that in before I start. Our union leaders will tell you, and they've said it many times at conferences, that our members are not prepared to fight. It's either they're more worried about the job one year, and next year they're more worried about the pay. Whatever we propose, they'll come something opposite. Faced with cuts of £1,800 and £2,700 a year, our admin and clerical members had a choice. Do they fight or do they accept it? They decided to fight, contrary to what our union leaders had advised at the time. And by fighting, they had meetings. We had mass meetings where we decided to ballot from the floor, decided to ballot for industrial action. We voted overwhelmingly for strike action of the admin and clerical staff. We had a one-day strike on 1st of November, followed by a 3-day strike 22nd of November, and then a 5-day strike starting on the 28th of January. Up to 500 workers took strike action, mainly young women. Over 100 pickets every morning across the 3 hospital sites. We raised £50,000 for our strike pay. These young women won concessions out of our management by sticking together and showing solidarity. They did it without the national leadership, who only Dave Prentice turned up on the last day of the 9th day of the strike. We didn't win our strike, we didn't win 100% concessions, but if we hadn't took strike action, things would have been a damn sight worse. We forced the management on the back track, we won the arguments, we won the support of the community. We showed that strike action is popular in the NHS, and we've inspired other people to take strike action. We had no choice but to fight as far as our branch was concerned. And we learnt lessons. The young workers who took strike action have learnt many lessons. 9 days on strike makes you think about what's happening, who runs society, who runs the hospital. I've seen your manager make a mess of your job and being paid 3 times more. You certainly learn a lot of lessons about who actually runs the hospital. And they've had 9 days on strike, which I work out has been 9 days more than Brendan Barber ever had in his career, and 9 days more than Dave Prentice ever had in his career. At Unison Conference, we were the only branch taking strike action last year, unfortunately. We felt, a lot of our members thought we were fighting on our own. Dave Prentice said this year 17 branches are balloting for industrial action. We've got to make sure that this time next year it's 1,700 branches taking industrial action. The lessons that we've got, you've got to fight together, you've got to show solidarity. You can't fight alone. Let's fight together and let's get this lot out of power. Thank you.
Ian Bradley, member of Unite Construction and currently standing for election to the London and Eastern Executive Council seat. Many of you probably know that we faced 35% pay cuts 18 months ago, and we had a 6-month battle to beat that, and I want to thank NSSN for all the support they gave us throughout the campaign. But the actual fights for in construction are actually far from over. We've still got a major problem, and that is false self-employment. Most of us are put into bogus self-employment schemes where we have to pay £30 a week just to receive our own wages. Of course, we don't receive holiday pay, sick pay. We can get laid off of work at a moment's notice. But more importantly, what that does, it opens up the door to blacklisting. Now, many of these construction firms say that blacklisting is a thing of the past. But when you've got 28 members of a union being kicked off the Crossrail project, the biggest publicly funded project in Europe, then obviously blacklisting is still a relevance today. Now, we've got a mass campaign going on in Unite at the moment, a leverage campaign where we're actually protesting, trying to hit their customers, trying to hit their clients and really sort of affect their pockets. But what we need alongside that, of course, is recruitment, because the thing we managed to do successfully throughout the Sparks dispute was the official and the unofficial action, bringing that out onto the project. And that's not a sort of thing that I think should just be done in construction. It needs doing for every sector within Unite, because, like the brother said earlier, there's a layer within Unite that really want to see a fight. And what we're getting sick and tired of at the moment is McCluskey talking about a general strike. Well, come on, Lynn, you're the leader of the biggest trade union in this country, right? You're not just the leader of the biggest trade union in this country. We organise power stations, petrol refineries. We have the power, you know what I mean? Because the NHS demo in September is going to be fantastic. You know, it's going to build confidence, you know, and I'm going to be there along with thousands of other people. But we need more than just protests. We need strikes. We need mass strikes. We need mass civil disobedience. But it's not the sort of thing you're going to get from the Unite at the moment, because, let's face it, there's a problem with their relationship with the Labour Party. You know, they turn around and say that they're going to reclaim the left within the Labour Party. Then a member of our Executive Council, Kingsley Abrams, gets suspended for voting against cuts. What does he get told? Well, just go back, keep your head down, this is a long-term project. Falkirk West, Unite members are being barred from electing the candidate in Falkirk West. What do we get from Len McCluskey? We're going to take legal action against the Labour Party. Well, I've got something better than that. It's called £3 million a year. That's what we give to the Labour Party, and that's what we should be threatening them with. Because one thing our unions can't afford to do is wait till 2015. Because it's not going to be a case of not so fast, not so deep. It's going to be a case of do exactly the same as what the Tory party is doing now. We don't want no cuts. It's not no fast, not so deep. It's no cuts at all. And if they won't give us that, then we will take it into our own hands. We should be striking civil disobedience and putting this Tory government down and warning the next government that comes in, if you try the same, we will do the same to you.
Right, comrades, we've got 2 more speakers from the floor.
My name's Hannah Roach and I'm a public sector volunteer in Shropshire. Now, the first comment I want to make, if work has made us free, then how come this government is getting away with murder? What I want to say is I have suffered so much over these past few months. I worked in a call centre after I graduated, and I'm speaking more from personal experience here. I worked in a call centre and I faced the hell from a bullying line manager, which made me ill. It made me ill to the point where I got depression and anxiety and I couldn't work, which led me to be assessed by Atos for a work capability assessment. Now, as you probably all know, these work capability assessments focus on your physical ability and your mental ability. Now, for me, I was sat in this room. It was the hardest thing for me to just sit there and say, yeah, I'm feeling like complete rubbish. But the experience in the call centre was enough to put me in that situation and make me realise that I'm not the only one fighting and struggling against this government. And if you had said to me at 13 years old, because that's the age I started working at, that I would be working in a call centre, that I would be standing here saying these words, I probably would have laughed at you. But since I joined the party, I can say this is almost, you know, this is, sorry, I've lost it. Yeah. Thank you.
Greetings, comrades. Since I'm the last one, I'll try and be very fast. I'm not a public speaker. I'm not even a union member at the moment. I'm here as an observer. My name's Platon. I am from Nuneaton, which is outside Coventry. I'm a member of the Socialist Party. I've mostly been putting my energies into trying to build Tusk. We actually, in Nuneaton, put forward the largest number of Tusk candidates in the last election, although we obviously weren't competing with Tusk branches in the cities. I just want to say that I think, you know, the members of my Socialist Party branch and the trade union folks that I work with in Tusk are fully behind the idea of a 24-hour general strike, but they also, I think, fully support the idea that's been raised here today of developing essentially a coalition of the willing, to use that unfortunate phrase. Just as all trade unions who want to fight must eventually break with the Labour Party, unions that want to fight may have to eventually break with the TUC or leave it behind. I mean, today I've heard several examples of, go back to what Tony Mulherin was saying about Joe Anderson in Liverpool, or even the position of somebody like Billy Hayes, who was on our platform, Steve Gillen, who was on our platform, one foot in the Labour Party, one foot in the NSSN, or one foot in the anti-cut struggle, as they say. There is an irony or a paradox, or as, you know, when I go back to the old word of a contradiction between trade union leaders who talk about a 24-hour general strike against the government, but will not withdraw their labour, as it were, i.e. their funding, from the Labour Party, which essentially has the same policies. So they're not willing to challenge the austerity policies of their own enemies, but they are willing to challenge the austerity policies in public of the Tories, but not willing to challenge the austerity policies of their own party, the Labour Party. I just want to finish by saying it's obvious that being still connected to the Labour Party and perhaps also to the TUC are a ball and chain on the ankle of the organised working class. I'm not suggesting at this stage an immediate break with the Trade Union Congress or a break that's done in anger, but there must be a limit to our patience, essentially. I hope that we're not here in a year's time talking about pushing pressure on the TUC to call a 24-hour general strike. I hope that by that time, we will have organised a 24-hour general strike. Thank you, comrades.